Hello, thanks for joining me once again for another one of Electric Avenue's YouTube updates. For those of you who watch week to week, you know the drill. For those of you who are maybe new, uh, this is just my opportunity to kind of run down what are the new releases that have arrived in the shop this week. And there might be some things that you don't see that actually are out there that either we haven't gotten or maybe they had some other sort of problem with getting them out to folks or whatever. But these are the things that I have to show. So last week was a marathon week. It was a huge video, probably one of my longest. And so this week I'm going to try and keep it maybe around half that length. There isn't a whole lot to show. There are things, but usually, typically, holiday weeks are a little bit less. And considering that we had what was Columbus Day or Indigenous Peoples Day on Monday here in the States, it's a little bit less this week. But there's still really good stuff. So hope you got your coffee, your beer, whatever whatever you're sitting back and watching this mug with right now. So, all right. First up today, and I think this is of note to people. All right, so last week we had the new Roger Waters Dark Side of the Moon Redux, redo, where he sort of interprets his version of where Dark Side of the Moon stands for him today. And a lot of people, it was very polarizing. Obviously, there have been huge tragedies in Israel this week, and now Gaza is just a mess. So it's an interesting time to be releasing that album on the 50th anniversary of Dark Side of the Moon. And the album was just as polarizing, I think, as I'm not to trivialize it, but it was a pretty polarizing release on that. And he had some sort of issues at a show in London where he was reading excerpts from his autobiography instead of performing music from the album, which I'm not so sure some people were probably just okay with that. But anyway, so the big thing this week is the official re-release of Dark Side of the Moon. This is the 50th anniversary edition. This was remastered by James Guthrie, who did the Animals remix, the 2018 one. And the last time this was done by Bernie Grundman, which is the version that we've traditionally been selling as a new version for several years. This says remastered for the 50th anniversary, produced by Pink Floyd. There's not much more to tell you. I think it's sort of standard black vinyl, but who knows? This is the version that was in the box set that they said probably wouldn't be out later, and here it is, because record companies just can't hold back on making money where money is there to be made. But maybe it is appreciably different. I'm not really sure. I guess we'll find out when people start hearing it. All right. Also, by the way, that is available on CD and this nifty little Dolby Atmos Blu-ray, which was probably part of the set too. I think it was. Here it is on its own. So if you want a 5.1 surround mix of it, you can do that now. And if you don't want the whole box set. Okay, another sort of big archival release this week. Black Sabbath's Reunion from the Reunion shows. This one is from 1997 at the NEC in Birmingham, England. Shout out to Birmingham, my friends over there. Let's see. This is 3 LPs on Purple Smoke vinyl from the 1997 reunion tour. Yeah, I think that there's a black vinyl version too, but this is the indie store exclusive. Featuring the original members of Black Sabbath, Ozzy, Tony Iommi, Geezer Butler, and Bill Ward. 16 live recordings of their greatest hits, remastered from the original source tapes, including 2 remixed bonus tracks. So that's quite nice. Let's see there. Let's see. I don't know if there's more to say about that, but Sabbath fans rejoice. Okay, there's a few new releases this week, but I feel like they've been kind of going a little light on the new stuff and focusing so much on all the whatchamacallit, the catalog stuff. But here's a new album from this guy's pretty prolific, Zack Bryan, country, sort of Americana, more country rock. Um, yeah, this has been streaming for a little while now. I think so. Finally out on vinyl and CD. Um, Starts with something that says a poem. Features War and Treaty, Sierra Farrell, Casey Musgraves, and Lumineers. So I think this is a big kind of crossover record for him too. So it's the most bizarre cover art for a country album. Maybe, I mean, in 2023, maybe not. Maybe that's what it looks different on a little thumbnail than there. New Christone Kingfish Ingram, live in London. Um, Kingfish is one of the most talented young blues guitarists around. And this is a complete concert on 2 LPs. Guitar World says Ingram sets the bar terrifyingly high. NPR says transcendent live shows, and Mojo says astonishing creativity. So, yeah, and I remember there was a video a few years ago now, where his mother had passed away. She was like one of his biggest proponents, and he was there playing right next to her casket. It was just kind of sad and haunting. So anyway, this features a 10-minute version of Mississippi Nights. So I'm sure there's plenty of riffing going on there. Another new release this week, Metric with Formentera 2. And Metric released part 1 last year. And apparently they recorded so much stuff, probably through the pandemic and all, that they had more material. But this is on clear pink vinyl, featuring Just the Once and Days of Oblivion. The first song that was on part 1, the last record, was 10 minutes long, which was sort of the longest thing that I'd ever heard Metric come up with. But it was a quite a good sort of electronic rock pop album. And part 2. So you get a little more if you liked it that much. I mean, it was good. It sort of made an impression. Ringo, this is a 10-inch. He keeps doing these EPs, Rewind Forward, the new EP featuring 4 new songs, featuring Paul McCartney and Joe Walsh. So you get half the Beatles on this. Let's see, there are Shadows on the Wall, Feeling the Sunlight, Rewind Forward, and Miss Jean. I'm not sure why he keeps doing these EPs. I guess it kind of gives fans a little bit at a time, and then they're not, sort of bombarded with this whole, like, big album project sort of thing. Croce's, this is their new full length. Good Night, God Bless, I Love You, Delete. This is 2 LPs on black vinyl. I think there's a color vinyl too. That one hasn't quite gotten here yet. There are guest appearances by LP of Run the Jewels, and Robert Smith features on the song Boys Cry, not Boys Don't Cry, which is a big Cure song. Some people might be into that. Deftones, probably fans looking at that. All right, and then there's some reissues here I've got to show. The Cranberries, To the Faithful Departed. This is their 3rd album, and it sort of came at a time when they'd had pretty big breakout success with the first album, massive success with the second, which had Zombie on it and Ode to My Family. And then this was the 3rd album, which was sort of, I don't want to call it a disappointment, because it was, I would say maybe commercially it was. It was more of a rock record. I think they sort of took that thing from Zombie and tried to go a little more rock with it. This had the single Salvation, also famous for having the song I Just Shot John Lennon, and ends with the song Bosnia, had the song War Child. So there were a lot of the rebels, a lot of political stuff on this record. And Dolores is no longer with us. Unfortunately, she died way too young. This features three previously unreleased demos recorded in Paris in 1995. So you do get, this is the double vinyl version. Yeah, so there is that. Let's see, Jim Croce. There's been sort of a Jim Croce reissue campaign going on, and this one's called the Definitive Croce. So there have been separate albums released. This says commemorating what would have been his 80th birthday and 50 years since his untimely passing. That's crazy to think about. Includes the classic albums You Don't Mess Around with Jim, Life and Times, and I Got a Name. Well, I suppose anybody would say, if people are still remembering me and commemorating my music 50 years after the fact, I must have had some sort of impression, right? Let's see. Yeah, this is just a 3 LP edition, and it includes all three of those albums in one. So I don't know. There's a CD for that too. I'm not so sure that might have the same things, but it's interesting how they just decided to put the three records in one instead of kind of like doing like, hey, here's like we found some unreleased tapes or something like that. But I guess when you say definitive, those are the definitive studio records. It's cheaper buying them that way than it is separately. So maybe that's sort of, they're giving fans a little bit of a break. Aerosmith, Draw the Line. We've had Aerosmith releases come out all year. Everything in the Columbia era. And so this one is continuing in that. Yeah, this is one of their best early albums from 1977. The masters for these things sort of went from Sony over to Capitol. So Capitol remastered them, and everyone says they sound really great, like better than the original vinyl because a little more care was done with them. And I don't know, at the time I'm not sure Sony was known for, or it was Columbia back then really was known for its how great its vinyl sounded. But all right, Rocktober continues. Last week there were like 15 new releases that were all pretty high profile. There was a Grateful Dead box set. There were 3 MC5 albums. There was a Yes singles collection. Other albums from Van Morrison, The Cars. There were just Talking Heads. There were a couple of Talking Heads, especially I think a lot of people might want Little Creatures that had the 2 big songs, And She Was and Road to Nowhere. And so those are available again. Anyway, and on color vinyl. This week we get Fleetwood Mac, Mystery to Me, an early album from Fleetwood Mac. Not the first, but it's probably around like their 5th or 6th record, I guess. Featuring Hypnotized, Emerald Eyes, Believe Me, and Why, pressed on limited edition Ocean Blue vinyl. It's crazy sort of to think when you see cover art like this, you're like, this is Fleetwood Mac? Because, you know, I think a lot of people are sort of like, all they know is the Lindsay Stevie era. So anyway, sorry, something is capturing my vision here. All right, I'm getting interrupted during my video. That's not good. Matchbox 20, there's a couple things from them. We get Mad Season, which I think this was the 3rd album of theirs. This was a very popular album. It had Bent was one really big song from it. So Rob Thomas. This is the first ever standalone vinyl pressing, a 2 LP set on sky blue vinyl. Also has If You're Gone. Let's see. And another one, Matchbox 20, More Than You Think You Are. And this one is a 2 LP set on violet vinyl. First ever standalone vinyl pressing of this, featuring the multi-platinum smash hits Unwell and Disease, and includes 5 rare bonus tracks, which seem to be like live tracks and stuff like that. Acoustic. All right. Let's see. Then there's AFI. And this is their new reissue, Sing the Sorrow. This one is one of their most popular albums too. I believe that this is like, it said like it was a black and red sort of color vinyl, or so. It doesn't say on the outside of the sticker for this at all. But yeah, AFI. This was produced and mixed by Butch Vig and Jerry Finn. Jerry Finn, rest in peace. He sort of worked a lot with Blink 182. He did a couple of Cure albums towards the end there, which were sort of controversial because they said, oh, Cure are changing their sound too much with this guy. But all right. Well, this has been out on the shelf for a while already, but now we get a REM Automatic for the People on yellow vinyl. This is an indie record store exclusive, remastered audio. I don't know when it was remastered or who. It says from the original analog master. I mean, that's sort of nebulous, right? But it's probably the same pressing that was out there. I'm not really sure. It doesn't say it's different, but it is on yellow vinyl. So maybe the more important thing is who remastered it than what color it is, but to each their own. Front 242, Tyranny for You. This album I don't think I'd ever seen on vinyl before. It's sort of a industrial rock, electronic, techno classic. It kind of came in the late 80s. This band from Belgium, I believe, had been sort of really important in the sort of era of what I would call industrial music. And by the time they got to this album, they were actually getting signed to Columbia Records in the US, and or Epic was one of those two. I think it was Columbia. But anyway, they really sort of were taking off in the US, and then I think they sort of, after a couple albums, they started to kind of run out of ideas being on the major label. They did one album where they replaced the vocalist with a female, and nothing against that, except it just was sort of like a 180, and people were sort of like, I don't know what to make of this. Then Nirvana came along and sort of wiped out a lot of stuff. So it took out Guns N' Roses, and it didn't really take out industrial music by any means, because then we had things like Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that, which were probably a little more like commercially palatable than maybe Front 242 was in the US anyway. All right, couple of interesting jazz reissues this week. This is by Joao Donado, and it's called A Bad Donado. And reading about it, it came out around 1970, and it's sort of this guy was like a Brazilian bossa nova type player, but this incorporated a lot of jazz fusion, psychedelic, funk. He was trying to branch out, and basically he only did like a couple more records after this. I think this may have been the last one he did in the US, actually. The bio said something like he took his money and ran and went back to Brazil, because he just was like, I'm tired of, I've had my time in the North. So that's interesting. Also, La Clave. This is a sort of a Latin jazz funk reissue. These are done by Third Man. This is the Verve by Request series. I should say. So you've got two sort of like Latin flavored things this week. This is supposedly, because I haven't heard this either, Latin jazz, fusion, funk, soul. Supposedly that's very interesting. Had some connections with like Sergio Mendes, and so some of the vocalists from that appear, mainly just sort of in supporting type roles and whatnot. And then there's Kai Winding, which is a sort of an interesting album for Verve by Request to be releasing. This is modern country vocal accompaniment the Anita Kerr singers recorded in Nashville. So this is an attempt to kind of bridge the gap between country and jazz music, and this basically features a lot of country classics on it. I see I Walk the Line, Cool Water, Detroit City, Dang Me, but done sort of like as a mix with jazz and country people. So another in that Verve by Request series. So they pick very interesting things. I'm sort of liking what they're picking. And then this artist I'm not as familiar with. I think he's sort of what I would call electronic-y sort of, but Blade. And this is a reissue of his first record, I guess, called Ever Since. But it's spelled like Blady. Okay. A couple of CDs to mention. Incognito, a jazz group that's been around for quite a while. Their new album is called Into You, and a Delmark Records 70th anniversary of lots of kind of famous, famous old blues and stuff that came out of the Delmark catalog. So, all right. And then one sort of final album I want to mention today. See, I told you this would be a little shorter. Mark Almond and Tenement Symphony, and this is a reissue that just came out in the UK. And sorry, I keep getting interrupted here. It's terrible. Mark is one of my favorite artists of all time. I think any of you who watch these videos know, because I've mentioned Mark like quite a few times. And I'm not talking about Mark Almond, the rock band, which that's MARK dash Almond. This guy was the lead singer of the band Soft Cell, who were famous for Tainted Love, is the song that everybody remembers from them. Now, what can I say about this album? Because it is a new release. Tenement Symphony is a reissue of an album that he put out in 1991. At this point in his career, I have to just preface this by saying, Soft Cell, people are like, I thought this guy was a one-hit wonder, or Soft Cell was a one-hit wonder. Well, they just had a reunion album, but that duo has had 5 albums, and they had 5 top 5 singles in the UK, one which went to number 1, which was Tainted Love. And then when he went solo, he had 2 albums with Mark and the Mambas, and then another 26 solo albums after that. So what is that? 33 albums that he's been a part of. That's certainly a lot more than just a one-time sort of person. As a solo artist, he had 2 top 5 hits and a number 1 song in the UK as well. So there's a lot that I can say about Mark. I've talked about him, but I think he's one of the greatest modern torch ballad singers that we have today. And so this album came at a time when his career, he'd been sort of on an indie label for a while. Well, he was on Virgin, but he was sort of like kind of doing more independent type artist stuff. And he really was kind of they were looking to kind of bring him back to the masses in the UK. So he signed a deal with Warner, and he decided that, they decided we should do some like Scott Walker, like Jacques Brel type stuff. So the song Jackie was a big hit there, which was a cover song from a song in the 60s, but it was all electronic up with the help of Trevor Horn produced half of this album. And so this is this is the album I'm recommending this week, which is, again, not for everybody, but it's a personal favorite. So to work with Trevor Horn, you can't be just like flash in the pan or fly by night. And Mark is certainly not that. And this album did very well for him commercially in the UK. It sort of brought him back to big commercial status because Jackie was so huge, and The Days of Pearly Spencer was also a top 5 hit. In My Hand Over My Heart was another hit. There were 3 or 4 songs on this record that actually reunited him with Dave Ball, his member and partner in Soft Cell. They hadn't made an album or written or played together at that point in probably 6 or 7 years, and so that was kind of a big deal at the time. But anyway, so one thing I think that's cool about this is sometimes people say, oh, I don't really like it when they mess with my classics and kind of, do things. And it's been remastered and it sounds really great. But the other thing that they did, which I think was cool, was they took what was side 2 of the album and actually made it side 1. So it really starts with the overture and Jackie, or the prelude and Jackie. It used to be on the CD and album that was side 2, and that was all the Trevor Horn stuff. And I think, the feeling was always that should have led the album. And so they sort of reordered the tracks. And then it's actually a double album because they took the final track from the original and put it as the beginning of the third side. That's the song Champagne. And then the rest of it are B-sides and things like that. So it kind of makes it feel more like an extended double album in a way. But the reason that they moved Champagne over to the second record was originally side A. What was side A was 27 minutes long, and the album hadn't been properly mastered in 1991 for original release because of the length of the side. So instead of jamming all those tracks onto one side again, they had to take something and move it. And so that's what they chose to do. This happens a lot in like jazz records now. You see things mastered at 45 RPM they try to get higher audio fidelity, quality. And in some case you're like, well, I'm flipping these albums more often, and you probably are. But in the good thing about that is that you're getting better audiophile quality than you would have gotten when they were released originally. So anyway, there's kind of like 2 schools of thought on that. Some people don't like to get up that often and flip their records over. This is something that you didn't have to do. When you have a CD, you just put it in and it plays all the way through. With streaming, it's even less so. You just are tapping whatever you want to listen to next, and it doesn't involve anything physical. So anyway, get up and get across the room once in a while. That's all I gotta say. Coming from this guy, that must mean something, right? All right. I just wanted to basically so thank you. Anyway, Mark Almond, Tenement Symphony. I don't have any of these really, or a lot in the store. So if you want one, let me know, because they're not cheap and they're imports. All right. But they are on a beautiful sea blue kind of vinyl that matches the color there. It is one of his best albums. He has, like I said, several albums. Great singer. Okay. I was gonna kind of cover, a little bit of what's coming up new release wise, because there's so much in the next 3 or 4 weeks. So next week, October 20th, we're leading with the new Rolling Stones. Hackney Diamonds comes out that day. The new Blink 182 reunion. I guess it's a reunion. It's been almost a decade again, I think. There's a Bob Dylan collection. It's not the one that it's not the Budokan thing that some people are looking for. That comes out in November. There's also a Cher's Christmas album. I think it comes out on CD next week, and then the vinyl is in November. And then there's some reissues next week from Devo, which is part of the Rocktober series, Tom Petty's Mojo, U2's Zooropa, and there's a Vince Guaraldi Charlie Brown Thanksgiving that's coming out. That's new, and Art Blakey and Hank Mobley both have Blue Note classics coming out next week. Then we're on to October 27th, which is around obviously the big Halloween festivity. And that week is probably, again, we just had last week was one of the biggest releases of the year. And I think October 27th is sort of similar. We'll have the new Taylor Swift 1989 reissue, Taylor's version. Prince Diamonds and Pearls box set. That one, if you want the vinyl, you have to let me know because it's a 12 LP set for about $350. Nirvana in Utero, there's a reissue of that coming out, which features bonus tracks, B-sides, things like that. New Black Pumas album. It's been a little while for them. I think this is their second, actually. It's been so long. Duran Duran have a new record out. It's sort of horror music themed a little bit, but they do a lot of cover songs and then some originals, and they bring back original guitarist Andy Taylor for some work there. He's suffering from cancer currently. OMD have a new record, Orchestral Maneuvers in the Dark. It's been that's their fourth since reuniting as a duo back about 15 years ago now. So they have almost as much material as they had the first time. Led Zeppelin, the fourth album, the one with Stairway to Heaven, is being reissued as a clear color vinyl. Clear, I guess clear is a color. Gaslight Anthem, their reunion record. Taking Back Sunday, their reunion record. Lots of reunions going on. And then new albums from Mountain Goats, Wild Nothing, and DJ Shadow. And then on November 3rd, we get the new posthumous Jimmy Buffett, his album he was working on when he passed away. Billy Joel, the Volume 2 box set. That's about $300 also. That's all of the records from Innocent Man onward. And then two tone poets, Jack Wilson and Kenny Burrell, on November 3rd. There's a lot more than that, and I'm just mentioning these briefly. And then November 10th, New Order Substance gets reissued, along with some of the 12-inch singles of that era, like True Faith. Jimi Hendrix, there's another live record, I believe. Grateful Dead on... sort of reissued on vinyl, the Without a Net album, and also Built to Last, which was, I think, their last studio record. It's the one with Touch of Grey. New Chris Stapleton album, and REM's Up reissue. For some reason, they skipped Up and put Reveal out. So we have that, and Reveal is a really great album. I highly recommend that. I think it sort of gets a bad rap for some reason. I don't really understand it. Maybe because it's people think it's a summery album, and I'm like, well, they thought Up was a Beach Boysy album, and I mean, Reveal is pretty beachy too. But there's also some great kind of sadder songs on there. I think that album is highly underrated and reminds me a lot of Automatic for the People, probably more than any other album that they did since that era. So, all right, so I think that about covers it today. Oh, look, I'm like 15 minutes shorter than last week. So, all right, thank you all so much. Tom Waits, all those reissues of Island Years are out. Bone Machine, get your Bone Machine. I don't know. Sometimes I don't like being like talking too much about product shortages and supply chain, because I think a lot of that has sort of eased itself. However, going into the holiday season, I don't know how fast they are running out of things, as there are so many more people buying vinyl now than there were 5 years ago or even 3 years ago. So So don't put it off if you see it's something that you really want. And also highly recommend. I've been playing the new Sufjan Stevens a lot, which was he came out this week in a couple of ways and dedicated it to the loss of his 43-year-old partner, which was just kind of heartbreaking. And listening to this album and the lyrics again, you kind of get the feeling that it's a universal kind of album, but it's also very specific in its love and sincerity about losing someone that you care about. We could all use a little bit more compassion these days, I think. And it's just terrible seeing what's going on in Israel and that whole area. So, on that note, thank you so much, and thank you for being so positive and for being the great people that you are, and coming back and watching these every week. I really appreciate it, and thanks for the support. And peace. See you again next time. Take care. Have a great weekend.